Welcome to this week's episode of The Climate Impact, where we bring you the latest in local weather and environmental stories from WTOL 11's team of reporters and meteorologists. From Lake Erie water quality and forecast outlooks to global climate trends, we have you covered for all your climate stories that impact you and your community.
The temperatures range for peak transmission for mosquito-borne illnesses is right around 79 degrees to 84 degrees, based on a study done by Climate Central. Without above-average temperatures and drought conditions lately, areas that are closer to some of the form of water functions as a beacon for mosquitoes to feast on humans as the warmer and dry conditions stick around in the month of September.
A mosquito's life cycle, going from egg to adult and then even going out and host seeking, is driven by climate, is driven by the weather, the temperature that it's experiencing, the humidity in terms of survival. So
Dr. Heidi Brown is an epidemiologist at the University of Arizona. She studies the influence of climate change on disease transmission and how the season for West Nile disease could be getting longer.
If it's really warm, I'm going to build up my population quickly. If I have precipitation events that are creating standing water, I'm creating habitat. And if it's humid, then the mosquitoes are able to fly, to live longer and potentially to fly further because they're not desiccating, they're not drying out.
Warm and dry conditions dominate our area in Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. But are these conditions what fueled the latest case of West Nile in Monroe County?
When we get the drought, we get sort of compression of those water sources. So the mosquitoes are getting compressed and the birds are going into those places, and you're getting that interaction more quickly. And then if you throw what we humans are doing of how we're engaging with our landscape, are we then exposing ourselves to it?
If our climate continues to warm, Brown says this could become a more common problem the further north you go in the United States.
We are longer seasons of greater warmth. It's taking later and later for that cold snap to drive the populations down, which means that we have transmission that's both ramping up and then also extending longer into across the year. So we're worried about or having to deal with these diseases longer.
Now, when we look at that transition risk, typically that happens mainly into the 80 degrees, the upper 80s. So pretty much the conditions we're seeing right now. And of course, as we break this down even more, since the last 50 years, we're actually seeing an increase in more mosquito days due to those warmer conditions. So we've seen about 22 more days of mosquito days throughout the last 40 to 50 years. And that could likely increase as we see a more warmer climate. Reporting in studio, I'm meteorologist Matt Willoughby for WTOL 11.
Luck is typically tied to the color green, but green is proving to be anything but in the village of Lucky.
Yeah, a stretch of the Toussaint Creek on one man's property has been green for weeks. Steve Iwanek, he went out there. He spoke with the gentleman on his property to see what's going on. What is the latest out there?
Yeah, so guys, for weeks now, Dustin Tyson has been keeping a close eye on the stretch of the Toussaint Creek that runs through his 20-acre property. Now, he claimed to us that it was abnormally green, so we went to check it out. Dustin Tyson lives on a farm in Lucky, 20 acres that has a stretch of the Toussaint Creek in his backyard. Normally clear, but recently different.
With no rain recently and whatever, the water level raised a little bit a week ago today and turned green.
A creek 40 miles long that connects to the Toussaint River, then feeds to Lake Erie in Ottawa County. Tyson's section looks like this. And just down the road, at a bridge under Fremont Pike, it's even worse. We're actually going to take a sample right now to get you an idea of just how green this water is. So allow me to just get a little bit. Now, as you can see, it's relatively clear, but there's a lot of green particles floating in it. And of course, I'm not going deep into the water. As you can see, the water is green. So what's causing this? We reached out to the Ohio EPA, who says in part, quote, Ohio EPA's Office of Emergency Response investigated and determined the green water was an unauthorized discharge of treated sewage from a wastewater lagoon operated by Northwestern Water and Sewer. That investigation happened September 5th, 1 week ago, when the EPA was notified about the issue, leading to the EPA telling Northwestern Water and Sewer to turn off a valve to the lagoon. That's located just north of Gilbert Road in the village of Lucky. We reached out to Northwestern for comment, and they shared in part, quote, "Although we are permitted to discharge treated water from this lagoon, due to the dry weather and the low water flow of the creek, the EPA instructed us to cease discharge, and we complied." Tyson says this is what the creek looked like last week. And now that the valve has been off, this is what it looks like now. But for Tyson, time will tell.
Didn't used to have the green, didn't used to have the algae growing on the rocks and everything during the summer months and stuff when the water is running. All that sort of changed in the last 5-6 years.
Now, Northwestern did provide us a copy of the permit filed with the EPA to show that they are allowed to discharge treated wastewater from the lagoon, and those with the EPA say they are continuing to investigate to make sure no other issues happen in the future. Reporting in studio, Steve Iwanek, WTOL 11.
Severe drought conditions have impacted much of the Buckeye State, and a largely dry and warm weather pattern is expected to continue through the middle to latter half of September. So what does this drought mean for you and your community? In this week's edition of the Climate Friday newsletter, I'm going to break down some of those tangible impacts that drought has had, not only on area farmers, but really on a number of cities across Ohio and southeastern Michigan. We're also going to talk about the long-range weather outlook and if we have any chance of shaking this weather pattern and receiving a bit more rainfall. If you're not already subscribed, WTOL.com/email. That is the best place to get the Climate Friday newsletter each and every week straight to your inbox. So let's break down the numbers, talking about this severe drought and new data that sheds some light on drought conditions across the Buckeye State and beyond. Each and every week, there is a new drought monitor that is released on Thursdays, and it provides insight into how the weather is shaping drought conditions across the region. Now, up to 95% of Ohio is considered abnormally dry, which means just about every single Ohioan is experiencing some variety of drought. Moderate drought has grown significantly more widespread than it was a week ago, and now is up to 78% of the state that is classified as a moderate drought. Just about a week ago, that was Toledo. However, Toledo is now, at least parts of the metro, considered to be under a severe drought, which is the next step up. Nearly half of Ohio is under a severe drought at 42%. Extreme drought is the next level at 24%, and the highest magnitude of drought, known as an exceptional drought, that classifies 8% of Ohio. And I'm going to be talking about some of the tangible impacts of some of those drought levels coming up in just a bit. So who needs rain the most desperately? Severe drought conditions have developed across parts of northwest Ohio, and that does include southeastern portions of the Toledo metro, and there's a secondary area to the west of Toledo in portions of Henry, Fulton, Williams, and Defiance counties. Right along and parallel to the Maumee River between Waterville down towards Bowling Green and over into Woodville and Oak Harbor, portions of Ottawa County, southern Lucas County, and northern Wood County, that is where severe drought has developed, and this is a new update over the last week that is reflected by the weather pattern that has really taken shape. Looking further to the west, the city of Archbold is also under severe drought. Looking just to the west of Wauseon and south and east of Montpelier and Bryan, and to the north and west of Napoleon, this concentrated area also, which has a lot of farmland there west of Toledo, very much in need of that rain as well. Now, believe it or not, the drought has afflicted southeastern Ohio even worse. From Columbus down into West Virginia. This is the epicenter of the Ohio drought, where not just severe but exceptional extreme drought has essentially made this growing season a wash for some area farmers, with an absence of rainfall lasting several months in duration. So what are some of the quantifiable impacts of these droughts that may be affecting you and your community? Let's start things off with a moderate drought. This is probably the most common drought that is occurring right now in northwest Ohio, with financial impacts to landscaping businesses. The grass is not quite as quick to grow, and some of those landscaping companies may be a bit hard pressed to find work this time of year. Hay yield can also be low, and that can cause financial impacts for area farmers. Also, small brush fires become more common when the ground becomes so parched and dry, and burning strongly recommended that you do not do this under moderate drought conditions. Also, impacts to ecosystems and wildlife. Fewer mosquitoes are observed and reported during moderate drought conditions. Now, there are still mosquitoes out out there, especially those of you that live or go nearby bodies of water, such as the Maumee River or area ponds. Yes, there are still going to be some mosquitoes around there. And during your typical time of day, right around sunset and twilight, there's going to be more mosquitoes. However, as a whole, there have been fewer mosquitoes late this summer than usual as a result of the drought. Let's take it a step up to the severe drought conditions that have started to unfold across parts of northwest Ohio. This is where we really start to get into some more significant impacts of the drought. Creeks are dried up, river levels are low. If you've been over to the Maumee River, perhaps at one of our area metro parks lately, you've likely seen those water levels are significantly lower than usual, and that is one of the impacts that is already affecting us here in the 419. Crops can be suffering, especially if that drought happens earlier in the growing season. We'll have to see how the next couple of months unfold as the fall harvest arrives, because this drought really didn't arrive until the second half of summer. You may remember we started off with a good amount of rain this season. Soil can also become dry and cracked. And last but not least, wildfire risk expands profoundly under severe drought. That is one of the reasons California is so predisposed to getting these wildfires, because when the soil is so parched and dry, any flames can quickly and rapidly spread. Last but not least, extreme drought conditions. Think central and northeastern Ohio, where crop yield can be significantly halted and stunted. Between Columbus towards the West Virginia state line, that is where some of the agricultural impacts have been the greatest. Lawns are totally dormant at that point. Folks down in southeastern Ohio really have not needed to mow. In terms of the agricultural impacts, the soybean yield is going to be way lower than usual. This is very significant, especially for the Buckeye State, where we do grow so much of that soybean crop, and the ones that do get produced are not as high of quality. Also, you're going to experience livestock stress. Whether the livestock eat corn or grass, either way is not really a great option, because that natural feed that occurs with the grass is not going to be as high quality or nutritionally dense, and also those livestock feed prices are going to go up, so there is a financial ramification as well. So how has our rainfall played out over the season? It's been very backloaded, to say the least. We had a very wet June, almost half a foot of rainfall. July, close to 3 inches of rain. Now, this August number might not necessarily tell the full story. There were a few days that were missing from the data at Toledo Express Airport, but it was still a very dry August as a whole, and September has produced less than 1/4 of an inch of rainfall, and that is really where the drought has picked up steam over the last several weeks. Now, what's interesting, when you look at the calendar year as a whole, now this doesn't tell the story of this summer, but Toledo's actually above average in rainfall for 2024, and that's more of a testament to spring than to the summertime months. Across much of the rest of Ohio, though, rainfall is well below average this year. Cleveland and Columbus are both over half a foot below normal in the rainfall department. Cincinnati 4.31 below average, and the city of Akron a little closer to normal at 1.13 inches of rainfall below average. Here across the region, let's just look at September right now. Toledo is close to 1 inch below normal in terms of rainfall so far this September. Cincinnati is over an inch below average. Columbus 1.25 inches below average. Mansfield and Wheeling are also well below average. The drought has really intensified over the last couple of weeks. To give you an idea of just how widespread this is, almost every single county in Ohio is under some sort of drought, and over 95% of the Buckeye State is under drought conditions. Looking at moderate drought, which is that next step up, close to 78% of Ohio classified as a moderate drought. Here's a breakdown of each one of those levels of drought, with extreme being the worst and abnormally dry being a precursor to more significant drought. Exceptional and extreme drought. This is actually a very, very widespread drought, and it's one of the worst in modern history that we've experienced this century so far. And that is mostly represented by southeastern and central Ohio, but now Toledo and portions of northwest Ohio considered to be under a severe drought. So will we see any rainfall or change in the weather pattern? Well, the long range is still trending very dry and very warm. Temperatures in the 80s. That deep red color across the lower Great Lakes indicates temperatures that are expected to remain well above average in the mid-80s. In the rainfall department, dry weather also for the lower Great Lakes into the mid-Atlantic. That brown color indicates precipitation that will be below average. It is going to be a bone dry weather pattern through mid to late September. Now, eventually we are going to get some rainfall. Fingers crossed that can happen at least before the fall harvest. We're going to keep you updated here. And if you're not already subscribed to the Climate Friday newsletter, head to WTOL.com/email. Follow along on social media for the latest content straight to your inbox every week. Take care.
Well, welcome to this week's WTOL 11 Weather Impact. I'm meteorologist Matt Willoughby, and this week we're breaking down all things football. Of course, it is football season, but this week we're having a specific topic for you. We are breaking down why are turf fields significantly warmer than grass fields. So this is a thing that we have kept up on at least over the last couple of years, and it's starting to become a big difference when it comes to global warming and our warming climate. Now, as you look at the physical differences, typically you really can't see the difference if you're, just in the stands, or sometimes you can see that difference. With grass, of course, it looks much greener than what we see with that artificial turf. But as you look closely, you see some of those black marks. Well, that's actually those rubber pellets you typically see throughout that artificial turf, which could likely make that surface a lot warmer with that natural grass. So this is a picture for you, pretty much a heat map artificial turf that was measured by Dr. Sebastian. He found that this part right here is the shadow of one of the goalposts, but this part completely exposed to the sunshine, and they saw that it was significantly warmer than that shaded part at about 192 degrees. So this is artificial turf we're talking about, exceedingly warmer than typical grass surface. But how warm? Well, if you have that air temperature around 85 degrees, that turf surface we saw was an average high of 117 degrees, with the highest being 157 degrees. But what about that grass surface? Only about 78 degrees for an average, but the highest it got was 88 degrees. So we're talking almost a 60-degree difference between turf versus grass. And as you may play on surfaces, not going to be the best for those athletes out there. So when we talk about some of those pros, though, when it comes to turf and grass, that consistency when the turf fields won't have to at least have maintenance it as much, and it is durable as well. So if you are, playing on it, whether it's a rainy or muddy conditions, well, it won't get messed up as much, and it is a low maintenance. So that's why a lot of high schools, colleges, and even NFL do have those turf surfaces, because it is in fact low maintenance and won't have to do too much like cutting the grass or anything like that. But it also is all weather play. So if you have a rainy, snowy day, well, that field not going to really get messed up much, unlike grass where you'll actually have that muddiness really start to ramp up as you got rain showers and snow showers. And look at some of those pros, though. Natural aesthetics. When I talk about this is really just the most environmental friendly part of a grass, and of course a cooler surface. We're talking much cooler. And with just that graphics before, saw how cool it can really get versus that turf and grass. And also it is cost efficient more to have grass fields. When we talk about that turf creating a warmer climate, it is actually creating its own urban heat island. So when we talk about urban heat island, pretty much that's when you see that surface of an area warmer than other areas within a city. So typically you'll see a downtown where it's much hotter and warmer because of less greenery, but actually this turf pretty much surface is creating an own urban heat island. And also it traps carbon and pollution as well. So many of those products is with plastic, and that is really just heating up by the sun and making it an uninhabitable environment for those players out there as they are playing on these extremely hot surfaces, and also leads to more heat-related illnesses as well. I talked about this. It could be more than 60 degrees warmer on a turf surface versus a grass surface. So is the turf right choice? Well, we've seen studies that it actually increases injury rates on turf field, and a lot of professional athletes are recommending that they do play on more grass fields than turf fields because the injury rate is in fact going up on turf fields. Also, during those hotter days, heat-related illnesses have become rampant over on turf fields just because it's so hot, and that turf is really just trapping that heat within that grass field, or at least that artificial turf field during those practices and games. And not only that, it is also not necessarily environmental friendly. So when we talk about those rubber pellets and that plastic that is made to make that artificial turf, it's really not the best for those athletes to be breathing that in, and also at least getting that onto their skin as well. So this is something that definitely we'll have to pay attention to as we go throughout the next several years, as we continue to see a warming climate. But also, as we get that warmer climate, that means warmer surfaces when it comes to turf, and for those athletes out there that do play on those artificial turf surfaces. This is meteorologist Matt Willoughby for our WTOL 11 Weather Impact. Hope you enjoyed this topic. Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. You can catch the latest anytime on our WTOL 11 Plus streaming app, available on Roku and Fire TV. Be sure to also download the free WTOL 11 news and weather apps for everything happening in your community and beyond.